Previously on Docs Outside the Box.
Listen up, everyone. Particularly if you're a program director and you're listening, I'm going to tell you something right now. These students are special, yo. How they work, how they hustle. They all have a mission. And when I say mission, it's not like I just want to become a doctor. It's I want to become a doctor because I want to do this for family, community. If you're looking for leaders, look here. Look at the SNMA. Let's change direction a little bit and let's do a little bit of some clinical talk.
Ew.
All right.
We don't talk about clinical stuff on Docs Outside the Box.
We're about to talk about clinical stuff. So I'm going to share this. I saw this video that was put out by an OB doc about a week ago. And another doc had reposted this and gave her example of what was going on. And I really needed you to explain this to me. So I'm going to play this and then I want you to really go into depth about what is going on here. Okay?
Okay.
I am going to share a story that I've thought about sharing a gazillion times since I've been on social media. I think today's the day. So I was in medical school from 1996 to 2000. When I was in my third year OB rotation, back then, all the patients delivered in the OR. Vaginal delivery, C-sections, they all delivered in the OR. And I remember going back for a delivery, Black patient. This was her fourth or fifth delivery. Delivered seamlessly, not an issue. And I remember it was me, the faculty, and a resident. Don't remember what year the resident was, doesn't really matter. But after the patient delivered, the faculty looked at the resident and said, "Have you repaired a 4th degree laceration yet?" And the resident said no. So, hold on. So, the faculty got a pair of scissors. Okay, the faculty got a pair of scissors and he put one blade in the vagina and one blade in the rectum and he cut a 4th degree in a patient who had already delivered. Now, I was a medical student. I didn't know if that was what was done and that's how they trained residents. I don't even think it even computed with me what was happening and how wrong it was, obviously, until I got more training and became a resident myself and realized what had actually happened. There's a lot of things that happened back then that we were made a party to because of the practices and obstetric abuses that were commonplace. And we couldn't say anything. We couldn't say anything. And although I will never know what it's like to be a Black pregnant individual in this country, I can educate myself and understand and teach and learn some more.
All right, we get the point. Right, so I wanted you to explain this because I think there was another doctor. She did a really good job of explaining this. Well, she did a good job of saying what happened in her experience. But I even had to come to you because I didn't understand specifically what was going on. And until you explained to me, I was like, wait, that's what happened? And I was like, hey, yo, so please let the audience know. Explain to them what happened in this situation.
So first I want to say that this is an indictment on your OB rotation. As a medical student.
You said what?
This is an indictment on your OB rotation as a medical student that you did not understand this story. So.
Listen, man.
Your OB rotation.
Those days have gone and passed. Those days have gone and passed. Did I get my degree? Please, explain.
Did you deliver a baby? That's
explain,
the question.
Please.
Okay.
I did deliver a baby.
Sure you did. So this is a unfortunate and egregious obstetrical abuse that she is describing. So for context, she says that she had a Black patient who was having her 4th or 5th baby. And what is very important about that, right? Because it's a fourth or fifth baby being delivered vaginally. What's important to understand about that scenario is that oftentimes, if you are delivering a fourth or fifth baby, it's a very seamless delivery, right? Oftentimes these patients will not even tear. I even told you, I had a patient once who had her fifth baby, and I literally was just standing there telling her jokes so that she could laugh, and she laughed the baby out. She didn't even have to put much effort into pushing, and she did not tear. Mm-hmm. So I want people to kind of keep that in mind at how seamless and easy that delivery is. So the fact that this patient had already delivered means that there was really nothing to do in terms of repair. It sounds like there were no lacerations. And so
this is a perineal tear that could occur between the vagina, the bottom of the vagina, and the anus.
If there is something to be repaired, right? If there's, if there is a tear. But it doesn't sound like there was a tear, right? Patient delivered, it was seamless, it was fine based on the story that she told. So that should have been pretty much after the placenta, that should have been the end of the delivery. But it sounds like the faculty member, the doctor, the attending doctor, who was supervising the resident, wanted the resident to have an experience of repairing a fourth degree tear. And so, very simply, the tears or the lacerations that can occur when you are pushing a baby out can go pretty much from any point, anywhere in the vaginal area down all the way to and through the anus. Okay. And involve the rectum, right? Involve the actual rectum itself.
Okay. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. If it goes all the way through and, into the rectum, that's a huge deal. And the problem with those tears that go all the way through is that they have a really bad complication rate, or risk at least. They have major complication risk, especially for what we call fistulas, which is a hole that develops between the vagina and the rectum. And so,
communication.
Right, communication, right? So stool getting into the vagina and all of this kind of stuff. So it can be a very bad social thing as well, right, for these women, because if you have stool kind of leaking into your vagina, that has a lot of different social implications.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what this doctor did was he took a pair of scissors and essentially cut a fourth degree laceration, or episiotomy in this case. We call it episiotomy because he did the cutting after the patient delivered. So not to facilitate delivery, because this patient already delivered, just so that he could have the resident practice a fourth degree laceration or episiotomy repair, which is egregious, unethical, immoral. Frankly, it's assault. Really is what it is. It's assault. And so in for me, in uncertain terms, really should have been followed up with some sort of legal action, if not criminal legal action. But it sounds like this young lady.
Here's a picture of the repair, but these are not. That's not into the rectum,
yeah.
But this is a second degree repair.
Yeah. So it sounds like, when she was a medical student, it didn't dawn on her what was going on, right? Because you don't actually know exactly what's going on because you're learning for the first time. And so when you're learning for the first time, you may not realize that what you're witnessing is something that is extremely abusive. You may not even realize that, right? I don't know at what level the resident was, and what.
And I forget the name. I forgot the name of the other doctor, but she puts out good content. But she said that this happened to her, or
Or
excuse me,
to a fellow
she was
resident.
a witness. She was witnessing
Mm-hmm.
what was happening as a med student, and the resident
Mm-hmm.
stepped in and said, "No, like you are not going."
Mm-hmm.
She said, the resident said this to the attending: "You are not going to create a fourth degree tear in this
Yeah,
patient."
absolutely. Absolutely. I will tell you, as a resident, I likely would have done the same, because you can't stand there and watch somebody do something to someone and just not say anything.
Yeah. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Have you ever, okay, maybe not to this well, yeah, have you ever seen anything that crazy in residency?
Not to that extent. Not to that extent.
Yeah.
I've had an attending jump the gun before. I've had an attending jump the gun and make the wrong call due to
Hmm.
impatience. There was a point at which I was signing they so I came in on the 19th. They were signing out to me about this patient, and there was a question of whether or not she had an ectopic pregnancy, but they were asking if it was a cornual ectopic pregnancy, basically a pregnancy that's kind of stuck in the corner, if you will, of the uterus, in one corner of the uterus. And those require resection. You have to actually cut those out. But the story that they gave, the patient kind of walked into clinic and she didn't have any pain. She didn't really have much in terms of bleeding. And then somebody did an ultrasound and they saw this, cystic structure. There wasn't a fetal pole, but there was a question because she had a positive HCG level X, Y, and Z. And the story just wasn't quite making sense to me. The problem was that we were in sign out and this patient had already been sent down to same day surgery, right? To pre-op, to essentially be whisked off into surgery. So the day team was now signing out. And so me as the night team, I was going to be taking over and doing this surgery. And so because the story didn't sound right to me, I was like, hold on a second. Let me look at the ultrasound myself, go back in her records a little bit. The problem was the technology at that time. I forget what system we would use at the hospital, but the technology at that time, you try to sign in to their PAC system, to see the images. And it was like, it would take forever and ever and ever. And then it would log you out, then log you back in, and then log you out. So it kept doing that. And anesthesia was like, oh, are we going yet? Are we going yet? And my attending goes, oh, well, don't let me be the holdup. Let's go. And I was like, wait. And I literally said to her, I was like, wait, I want to see the images. And she's like, no, 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 let's go. Let's take her back. So they start taking her back. I try again. The system is not working. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. So we go back to the operating room. As we're in the operating room, I'm like, let me just do a quick vaginal exam on her. Because for me, I was like, is she really having an ectopic or is she actually just miscarrying? And one ways that you might be able to tell is if her cervix is open, right? If her cervix is open, then she might be miscarrying or she might be having, an incomplete miscarriage or something. Because I don't remember exactly what the story was, but I remember thinking that. And my attending said, no, do not examine her. Let's go. They said it's a corneal ectopic. Let's just go. I'm like, I don't agree with this. Fine. So she goes and she starts operating. She makes the cut. She keeps going down. She keeps going down to the point I even say to her, wow, you're really doing a good job at at doing this surgery, right? Meaning, I'm supposed to be operating, but you're doing it. But okay. So she goes down, down, down. We go to the uterus.
Nothing there.
Nothing.
Like weapons of mass destruction in
Not,
Iraq.
yes.
Ain't nothing there.
Yes. Nothing. Not a bulge,
Ho
not a
ho.
nothing. And then I say to her, can I do a vaginal exam now? And she's like, yeah. So I do the vaginal exam, cervix 1 centimeter open, and get my finger right through it, which she probably just needed DNC.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, we patch her up, we do the DNC, take her out, and at some point during the night, I go back and I'm like, let me see if I can get into the images. And finally, I get onto a computer where it is working. And I go back 2 years before. Guess what's on that ultrasound? Little cystic structure right at the corner of her uterus. It had been there the
Yeah, I see.
entire time.
So would you guys tell the patient when she
So
woke
I
up?
told the patient the truth. I told the patient
Mm,
the truth. I'm like, that's not the surgery that you needed. And I told her surgery that we did. I wanted her to know, like, this is, because patients will confuse things. This is not a C-section. You did not have a C-section. You just had a cut where we looked inside to see if we could find the pregnancy there. We did not find it. Instead, I ended up doing a vaginal exam, found that you were miscarrying, and we did a DNC. She must have been bleeding.
mm,
She actually must have been bleeding.
mm.
But
So I think I try to figure out if does this happen in surgery. I'm sure it happens in surgery.
mm,
I just can't think of it because this, like, I know we were talking about this a couple days ago. Like, man, would you see an attending like injured a common bile duct so that their resident can fix it? I'm like, I can't see that
yeah.
happening because it's such a vital structure. The complications are so high. Why would you even F of that? The closest thing that I can see where it's kind of like, in the gray zone, who knows? But it sometimes, for the most part, is a benefit to the resident, is the appendix.
hmm
You do like an incidental
Yeah.
appendectomy. You have a gunshot wound to the belly. You have
And they're
injuries
like,
all
hey, take
over.
this
Sometimes they're
appendix.
like, hey, man,
Mm-hmm.
take this appendix out so we don't have to ever come back into this belly. I've seen that happen and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I can't see that happening. Yeah, because I understand what you're saying. Like based off of the pictures, the morbidity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the issues that you could have of creating this type of
Yeah.
tear that I'm assuming based off of this video, just the OB doc did it. Because for fourth degree tears, shouldn't that be a combination of like surgery and
No,
OB?
you don't have to. I
Okay.
mean, unless it's
Okay.
really that bad, but no, you don't. Usually we will repair
Mm,
that. And I mean, I'm sure it's a extremely delicate repair, a very time consuming repair, a very risky repair. Just, you deliver a baby and you pray you never get a fourth degree tear. You just don't want it.
do you think ever, I always think about like, so for example, like we're going to talk about sinners and like, making a deal with the devil, or you won't ever wonder how some people get to a point where they make a really bad decision, or, when people get into a bad situation,
Mhm.
when you go back and you look at that bad situation, it's usually, um, there are multiple mistakes that are
Mhm.
made before that really big bad
Mhm.
decision,
Mhm.
right? What I'm saying is like for a resident at that time to see that type of situation
Yeah.
occur and for them not to say anything for a whole host of reasons. Maybe they don't want to say anything because they don't have the courage to say something, or maybe they don't say anything because they just don't
Mhm.
know. But do you think that's kind of part of like the process of like leading you down a
Oh
bad
yeah.
path? so that when you're an attending, like you really don't, your moral compass is
Yeah.
off.
Oh,
Do you see what I'm
absolutely.
saying? Whereas even if you're a resident and you see that happening, like it takes a lot of balls and a lot of guts to be like, yeah, that's not happening on my watch, right? But like, is it worth it to speak on something like that then, so that by the time you're an attending, you've already flexed that muscle multiple
Mm-hmm.
times to be like, I'm going to really stand up for what's going on with the
Yeah.
patient. What are your thoughts on that? Because I are really times, a lot of times I feel like, people who really make bad decisions as an
Mm-hmm.
attending,
They
a
were,
lot of times they were making bad
yeah,
decisions
as
as
residents,
residents
or
also.
they saw people making bad decisions and didn't think about how bad a decision those decisions were, right? And so they gave themselves a pass, or they gave that person a pass, and justified in their minds that, well, it was for the greater good of, name whatever good they have, in their head, right? And so in this
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah.
the good, quote unquote, being that, well, I get to teach my resident how to do this repair, because if I don't teach the resident how to do this repair, then if they should ever encounter fourth degree repair, how will they ever know how to do it? And there are
The
ways.
question though is, would you do that on a patient that is of a different hue? Would you do that on a patient? Like
Right,
these are things
right,
that you
right.
gotta,
That's the question,
and
right?
it's,
Would this physician have done it on a white patient? You know, I've had attendings tell me that patients are VIP.
yeah, I've heard
And
that a
I
zillion
had one
times.
physician, one attending that said, "Oh, this is my VIP patient. She's a lawyer." And I flat out said to him, I was like, "Your patient is not VIP to me. She might be VIP to you." I said, "But she's not VIP to me." I'm like, every single patient will get the care they're supposed to get on my service. That's
Mm,
so, "Oh, but she's a lawyer." I'm
yeah,
like, I don't care what the hell she is. She's going to get the care that
yeah.
everybody else gets on my watch. Like sometimes
Okay.
you got to say things like that, because otherwise, you feel like, here's my question. What does it do to you? What do you think that it does to you to watch these things happen and never say anything? That don't eat you up
You got to
inside.
speak
Like,
up.
it
You,
doesn't,
you got to speak up, yo, because a lot of these
exactly.
mugs be a lot of times you talk about this stuff on your personal statement, or you talk about certain things. It's like, yo, this is your time to shine. You remember what you said in your personal
Right.
statement, whatever it may be. This is your time to
Right.
shine, right? So you got to speak up on this. I got you 100%
Yeah.
on this. I got you 100%. What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee. Yo, this is the end of this segment. I appreciate you for listening, but this ain't the end. If you want more, go ahead and click the next button on your favorite podcast app. Listen, that's next for more banter between me and Dr. Renee. That's next for more topics. That's next for more segments. Listen, did you hit next yet? Go ahead and click next. Hit it. Next. Peace.